Hello, everyone. This is Autumn. I'm admitting everyone all at once. We ask that you turn off your cameras until you're ready to present. And so far, we have two board members present. Thanks for your patience as we work this out. Tom, Dennis, do you want to have a conversation to liven up the room?
Okay, Autumn, everything's good on my end. Looks like we have a full agenda.
Tell us some jokes, Dennis.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not good at that, but everybody, I went through everything. I think Autumn's been doing a terrific job. I picked up my hard copies this morning, and well, as usual, we've got a lot going on. How are you doing, Keith?
All right. Good evening, everybody.
Good evening, John.
Our attorney is going to be joining us here in just a moment. We got Tom, we got you, we got me. Is Rachel here yet?
Rachel's not here, and Rick is coming into the room now.
Yeah, Rick's coming in. That gives us 3. Is that going to be a quorum?
Zach isn't coming.
I don't know.
We're okay with the 3 of us.
Rick, we got 3 of us here. So we're okay with it being a quorum and ready to go?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So are we recording now, Autumn?
We are recording now.
Very
Hello,
good.
Autumn.
All right. So welcome everyone to the April 5th, 2022 meeting of the Village of New Paltz Planning Board. Got quite a few agenda pieces this evening, including some administrative business, public comments. We have no public hearings, but we have several application reviews that we will need to go through here. A couple of them having a certain level of detail. So with that in mind, let's go ahead and get started. The March 15th, 2022 minutes are published, but there's only 2 people here that were attending that meeting. So we really can't do a motion to approve because I was not here, and that would only leave 2 people out of the group that was here. So we're actually going to defer that to the next meeting, at which time we'll go through several of the meeting minutes. Next will be the updates from the Village Board, Ulster County Planning Board, or Environmental Planning Board. And as I understand it, Will is not going to be with us. Is that correct?
Yes.
So what he did want us to mention is that beginning April 19, 2022, we will be going to live in-person meetings. They will be held at the Elting Memorial Library. So let me read that again so everyone is aware. On April 19, 2022, we will return to in-person meetings at the Elting Memorial Library. So we'll no longer be doing the online meetings. The next that we have is the public comment. Autumn, is there anyone who wishes to speak Do you see anyone? No, okay.
Yes, yes, I would like to, please.
Okay,
Raised.
one moment, please. All right, so we do have one person who'd like to speak. And so if you would, please go ahead and state your name.
Hi, my name is Jane Schanberg. I'm a resident at the Ridge at 58 South Manheim Road, which is the property adjacent to the Manheim Muse applicant's property that you have before you tonight. I know that there will eventually be a public hearing, but since the backs of our apartments, our sliders are about 12 feet from a retaining wall at the south end of the property, this site plan does impact our light, our air, and our comfort in terms of facing the parking lot. And so what I would like to ask respectfully, if possible, we have some concerns. We've had a neighbors meeting and some of my other neighbors may be here along the way here or in the future. We would love to sit down and just explain to the applicant or to the engineer what our concerns are that revolve around vegetative screening, some noise abatement. There is an acoustic bowl on the property, so there is that. And then just in terms of headlights and lighting for the parking lot. Those are kind of the main issues, but we would love to sit down and go over it if we could possibly.
Thank you. Again, I'm sorry, my pencil was not quick enough. And you're at the,
My name is Schanberg, that's my last name. I live at 58 South Manheim in the Ridge Apartments, about 12 feet from the property line of the Manheim Muse proposal.
okay, and you have concerns about noise abatement, is that correct?
We have concerns about the site plan, the configuration of the site plan on the south end of the property, especially along the retaining wall, because it's higher than our yard and things come tumbling down into our yard. And we want to make sure that there's adequate screening, that I'm on the first floor, but some of my neighbors are on the second and third floor. So there are light issues with cars coming and going with the parking lot. And perhaps some acoustical issues as well. So we would just like to go over those with, I don't know if you want to do it with the planning board or how we would work it out, but I think it's pretty simple and straightforward. And I think that, I think
Okay.
that we would appreciate being heard on this.
To that end, I always believe that it's perhaps more productive if the people who have concerns speak directly with the engineer or the company. Andy Willingham, are you around there?
I am.
Andy is the engineer for that project. Andy, would you be willing to speak to Ms. Schanberg? Can you get some information to her or to discuss some of these issues before it becomes a planning board issue?
Absolutely. We can meet and go over them. No problem.
That would be wonderful. Thank you very, very much indeed. That's perfect.
And please keep me apprised, Ms. Schanberg, of how the conversation is going. I want to make sure that your concerns are noted, held, and see if we can do something to make some adjustments that might satisfy both parties here before it becomes a real issue.
Exactly. That was my purpose. And the neighbors have met in our building that's most impacted by this. And we're pretty much all of a mind. So we're not going to be going off in all directions.
Okay, that sounds good. So I'm
thank-
going to leave that between the two of you.
Right.
And then at our next meeting, I'd like to get an update from you, Ms. Schanberg, to let me know how that's been going.
Terrific. I'll be back and I'll be in touch with Mr. Willingham meanwhile. Thank you very much.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any other people that have items that they would like to discuss? No? Okay. So knowing that, then we're going to move, we're going to hold the public comment open as this is online, and there is the possibility that some people may have some difficulties accessing things. So we will hold this open until the end of the meeting, which time we will once again look for public hearings, and then we will close the public comment. So I believe I have Rachel trying to get in here. Let me just take a look real quickly.
I got it.
Okay, there we are. Thank you. So what we will do next is we're going to be moving on.
John, did
back
you
to
want,
the public hearing? So we're going to begin our application reviews. The
John,
first
did you
one-
want to go back to the meeting minutes now that you have Rachel on as well?
Well, there you go. We can do that. So did everyone get a chance to look at the March 15th meeting minutes?
Yes.
Yes.
Are there any additions, subtractions, edits that you think need to be made?
Not for me.
Nope.
Okay. In that case, I would like to get a motion to approve the March 15th, 2022 Village of New Paltz Planning Board meeting minutes.
So motion.
So motion.
Need a second,
Second.
please?
Aye.
All in favor?
Aye.
Hey,
There is one abstention, and that would be me. So thank you very much for reminding me of that. And that's one piece of business that's now taken care of. So we're going to move on to the application review. It is a site plan and special use permit for PB 2201 100 Woodland Pond Circle. I think everyone knows the summary of it. We have previously classified this action as an unlisted action. There was a referral that was required to the Ulster County Planning Board. Also because it is within 500 feet of the town boundary, notice of the public hearing for the entire application must go to the town clerk electronically at least 10 days prior to any hearings. And there is, of course, a public hearing that's going to be required. So the next steps are that we are going to have to, we're going to listen to the applicant's presentation. We're going to look whether we're going to decide to conduct a coordinator review or not. We're going to go through some issues here that need to be settled and some recommendations we have regarding those issues and reviews. So with that in mind, who is here to represent the applicant?
Hi, this is Michelle Gramolia. I'm the president and CEO of Woodland Pond. We do have several others on, from what I can tell. We've got Michael Zierler, who's on our board, Tom Tango, who is our director of plant operations, and we have Bill Sparkman, our engineer, on the project. I'm not sure if there's anybody else, but so several of us are here. So since we last were in front of the planning board, we had a list of to-do items that you had given us. And at this point, we believe that we have sent over everything that was asked for, with the exception of one item. And that item, we did send a status update on per our legal counsel, which is the legal name change on the existing property. So that is in process. It's been filed. The request for the legal name change has been filed with the county. And but it is still pending. I just checked the parcel site myself moments ago. So that's where we believe that we are at this time.
Okay.
is it a name,
Attorney, have you
so
received-
simply a name change, or is actually requires a new deed?
There is a new deed, but it was for a name change. So the new deed with the legal name change had to be filed with the county. That name changed in 2016.
Okay, so when you get that finalized, you'll just submit that then.
Yep.
Okay,
We sent over the receipt from the attorneys that submitted it to the county, and Autumn's got that.
okay.
Okay, Mr. Attorney, you want to go through the the task list that was, the punch list that was there, and let's talk about those items that have been received and make sure that we're all clear on that.
Okay, well, one of the first things, have you gotten any comments from the Ulster County Planning Board? I don't think that we've received any.
We have not.
No,
Okay,
they,
Autumn,
they-
have we received any?
No,
No, they
they're reviewing the application tomorrow night.
Okay,
yeah.
now the next thing has to do with whether or not we need to do anything further procedurally with seeker before we start getting into the substance of it. Now, as I understand it, with respect to these buildings, that you're not trying to come within the prior ZBA variance for height, that you are, your current application is within the current zoning requirements for height. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. And where are we with respect to the CRC funding? Are you going to be receiving any funding? Or
Not from the
any benefits or anything like that?
No, this will not come through the CRC. This is a very limited scope. We are going to be doing this through a bank construction loan, and those conversations have started.
So there'll be no public funding or any benefits like sales tax breaks or anything like that?
Correct.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, I think at this time, with respect to seeker, that the board can assume lead agency then, since it doesn't have to be submitted to other involved agencies.
Okay.
And if you could do that by motion, that would be good.
Okay, let me just make a note here. So I would like to get a motion to assume lead agency for seeker for the PB 2201 Woodland Pond Circle.
So moved.
I need a second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
So we have now assumed the lead agency for seeker.
And it was asked that I review the Article 78 and the settlement thereof. And
Yes.
there are no real issues that arise out of that directly. In the sense that the real nub of that settlement agreement is simply that it was before they received an approval from the planning board, and they had to include certain things in the planning board approval, which they did. However, there are some issues dealing with the settlement, part of which dealt with wetland buffers.
Correct.
And whether, that you couldn't impact on those, and the applicant says that they are not. But I certainly am not qualified to make that determination to advise this board. So my suggestion to the board is that you have the village engineer look at that issue and make that determination and advise the board. And if the applicant wants to submit anything in support of that, other than what they already have, then they can do so. But I would suggest that the board reach out to the village engineer to go ahead and deal with that settlement issue, as well as there is some, in the FEIS, there were some well water issues as far as testing.
Right.
And as to whether or not those were sufficient for these new residences as well, or whether or not there should be more testing. But again, that's outside of my realm of expertise. And so I would suggest, again, on that issue as well, that the village engineer be asked to look into that issue.
So what we're going to do is look to see if we can get the village engineer to weigh in on whether the proposed expansion would trigger the need for similar well testing and monitoring, and the expansion for the adjacent properties on Shivertown Road. To the members of the board, do you have any comments on that? Either one of those, the having the village engineer make certain that the wetland buffers required by the original approval are marked, and review and confirm the present plan and the wetland buffers, as well as having the village engineer weigh in on whether the proposed expansion would trigger the need for some well testing and monitoring for the present project.
Yes.
Please go ahead.
Yes, I would feel more comfortable with that.
Okay. Anyone else?
I feel the same way. I think it's a good idea.
Okay, Tom?
Yeah, I support that as well.
Okay, so the first thing I'm gonna do is ask for a motion to approve a village engineer review of the wetland buffers required by the original approval and settlement. Confirm the present plan and wetland buffers.
So motion.
Second,
Second,
all in favor?
Aye.
aye.
Okay, so we are going to refer that to our village engineer. And the second one is having the village engineer weigh in on whether the proposed expansion would trigger the need for similar well testing and monitoring for the adjacent properties.
So motion.
And a second,
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
So that then has also been approved. So Autumn will need to refer those two items to our village engineer for their comment, and hopefully they will have that comment back relatively quickly.
On that note, Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
I would suggest that we hold off preparing the FEAF Part 2
Yeah.
until we receive the input back from the engineer. But after that, I think it would probably be ripe for this board to look at the FEAF Part 2 to see if there's any other issues that the planning board needs some additional studies or information on from the applicant
Okay, that
for
sounds
making
good.
a determination of significance.
I don't know how quickly he will be able to get that back. Autumn, if you can just let me know if he needs to contact me to give me some idea about how long it's going to take to get that back. Please have him do so, and reach out to me tomorrow and we can go over this again.
John,
Yes,
may I ask a clarifying question about that?
certainly.
Okay. So I believe at the previous meeting where we spoke to you all in February, if I remember, you were going to refer the application to the engineer at that time. I don't know if that was done or if I misremember. That's one question. The second question is, in terms of the well monitoring, I'm not at all, I wonder if we could get a little more detail about what the engineer is. Does that involve site visits and work that they need to do, or how are they going to assess that?
So in answer to the first question, no, it was not referred to the engineer.
Okay,
And to the second question, and Mr. Attorney, please feel free to correct me if I'm wrong. I believe the procedure and the depth and the detail of how he will propose a monitoring is something that he's going to have to provide us. I don't have the expertise to do that, but we feel that monitoring those wells
We have to go back.
is important, and how he's going to do it is something that we'll have to learn from him.
Well, I think that the threshold issue is going to be whether or not there is any need for additional testing. So I think the first thing he's going to do is look at the testing that was previously done. And it's possible by the parameters that were done and the results that were received, he might be satisfied that given this incremental increase in demand would not have any impacts whatsoever, or he may have to do some testing. But he's the one that's going to have to make that determination.
so the reason I'm asking the question is I'm a little confused. The wells that are being tested are water wells for residents who live in the town. Woodland Pond doesn't draw any groundwater. Woodland Pond is on village municipal water. And so I'm not sure where the construction of 3 buildings is going to have an impact on neighboring wells that are, on the order of 1,500 feet to the north.
I mean, if we're not walking up, you guys can have a minute. Just like,
Hold on a second.
Ross.
Well, I may be confused in that, Michael, but those wells were tested last time around when it was being built. Were you not on village water at that time?
Yeah, I have to assume I haven't looked at the FEIS in many, many years, but I have to assume that the concern had to do with the large amount of construction and earth moving that was going on. But Woodland Pond has never been on well water ever.
So you believe that the testing was originally done based upon the effects from construction, is that correct?
I'm speculating. This is not an issue.
According to the settlement agreement, Michael, at least the summary that I have here.
Yeah.
Is that settlement agreement identified certain residential properties on Shivertown Road that were required to be included on a list of residences in the FEIS whose well water would be tested immediately before and after construction, and mitigation proposed if the well water quality deteriorated because of the project.
Right.
So I don't know whether or not they were thinking that it wasn't the drawing of water, but simply the construction that might have impacted some groundwater. And in that case, then that's the decision that the engineer would make, is whether or not he thinks the incremental construction would have a similar risk, and he may or may not require some additional testing.
Okay. That's okay. I appreciate the clarification. Yeah, I suspect it had to do with the historical uses of the land and the fact that so much soil was being disturbed.
Right.
That you could potentially have runoff issues. So, okay.
And also on my meeting notes from last time, I have nothing that says we're going to be referring it to the engineer.
Okay, so that was my misunderstanding. I was in a train station. Didn't have a chance to write anything down. Okay, so those will go to the engineer. The other point that I just want to say is be interested to hear what the engineer has to say about the wetland buffers, because they are, there's nothing that we could find that actually identifies on the site plan specific wetland buffers. So, but we do believe that we have cited these so that they're well outside of the conservation easement, which we hope might reflect where the wetland buffers are. Anyway, that's all. I appreciate all the help.
It's 100 feet.
Now, you're saying that there were no specific buffer. Repeat that and explain that, would you please?
So the village doesn't have a wetlands law, and there's nothing that I could find that specifically identifies the distance that buildings have to be from the delineated wetlands. I mean, we looked hard and we looked at all the site plans. I came into the office and Autumn was very helpful. And I know our engineers also looked. And there's nothing in the settlement that specifically identifies a distance either. So
it does refer to
100 feet.
wetland and buffer protection, the settlement.
the settlement does, but it doesn't quantitate what that is.
Well,
Doesn't quantify.
we have
what
to
that
address it, though. We have to address it.
Yeah, so I'm saying I'm not at all clear what it was that where it is written, what the buffer is, that was memorialized in some fashion, so that we can know whether or not we're outside of that buffer. That's the point.
Got it.
These are federal wetlands. And the village doesn't have a wetlands law, so we can't refer to the code either.
No, you can't refer to the code, or obviously there's no buffers required for federal wetlands, as you know, and you're referencing. But the settlement does talk about the buffer protection shown on the April 2007 site.
Right, and that's what we went through, and there are no wetlands buffers delineated on the site. There's nothing that says, here's the distance, here's the buffer. The only things that we have are the conservation easement, which is what we've used as our reference line and respected that. So whatever your village engineer decides is fine with us. We just, I just wanted to point that out. So,
Understood.
okay, thanks.
May I add something?
Certainly.
I located a significant number of paper files today at the village hall, and there are some more maps and that need to be reviewed, which I will make available, as however it's possible to do that.
Great. And make sure those are the ones that also the engineer sees, Autumn, because that's what he's going to need to help him, give him the settlement agreement and tell him that part of the settlement agreement address the wetland buffer issues, and these are the maps, and he can always contact me to see if he needs any clarification.
Thank you.
Could we request copies of the same things that you send to the engineer that we don't already have? If it's the approved site plan, that's fine, but any of these new maps that you're referring to, so that we can also be on the same page with you all before we meet again?
Sure. There's no reason why not.
Okay, much
There
appreciated.
may be some logistic issues. I don't know if the maps aren't digitized.
Oh, yeah. Well, if it, if.
But certainly if not electronically, you will certainly have access to them
Yeah.
through
that's
the
fine.
office to take a look at them.
That's fine. That's perfect. Thank you.
I just didn't want to promise too much on Autumn's behalf of.
Oh, yeah. No,
trying to
I
digitize the
realized,
map.
right. Paper is fine if we can come and look at it.
Okay.
Thanks.
Okay, moving along. Last issue was that the settlement required that there be a condition of site plan approval requiring the project to design 2 wildlife crossings under the southerly access road to the Lent property between wetlands AAA and ZA, and install such during construction, which it suggested that become a condition of the approval.
Or if it's already been done, it's already been done. So
It's
Has
done.
it been done?
Yes, it's completed.
Okay.
The way that I was actually involved with the project during that time. And what my recollection is that the Article 78 lawsuit resulted in specific requirements in the site plan. And the planning board at that time had the Article 78 lawsuit, made sure that those items were incorporated in the site plan, and then approved the site plan based on those items.
Okay.
But to make a long story short, yes, those critter crossings, as we call them, are there, and easily verifiable.
can you identify them on like a small map or something like that we can also give to the engineer, for the engineer to verify their existence?
Yes, I can.
Okay.
They exist. They definitely exist. They exist, but they don't work because the critters are salamanders and they only cross where it's wet, and there are tunnels under the road and it's dry under there, so they don't use them. And so actually they're more of a deterrent because there's a little wall that they made, and they actually have to crawl around the wall instead of just being able to cross the street. It's a very low traffic street. But the only time I've seen those critter crossing used is when somebody dumped off a bunch of stray cats there, and it gave them shelter. But they're
Well, the
definitely
only-
there.
Okay.
So my understanding, Rachel, to that point was that they were actually reviewed and approved by the village engineer at the time, the way they were designed at the time. But as
Yeah.
we know, ground can move. So
I
if it's
know.
something that they want to verify, that's fine. But they were constructed as required.
Okay.
And that's fine. And you wouldn't, the planning board wouldn't have the jurisdiction to simply, based upon these types of approvals, the way that it was worded, to go back in and have a continuing duty. However, if there is that environmental issue of critters not being protected, that could be part of this seeker review for the project as well. So if the engineer can, if it looks like it's not working at all and everybody agrees with that, maybe there's a way to get it to work so that that can be addressed in this approval, although it's not simply confirming, it's not a follow-up to your prior approval because you did what you were supposed to do. But it's still an environmental impact that would have to be addressed in this project.
Well, if it were wet, if they found a way to make it water, because they only really use it once a year, you know, on the first night in spring when it's 50 degrees and raining. That's when they cross from the woodland over to the pond where they breed. They breed in a pond that's just across that road, Danskin Way. And that's where the critter crossings are. They're underneath that road.
Well, there are ways to make that happen.
If they can make it better, that would be great. I mean, maybe even just take down the concrete wall so they can just cross and, like, you know, because it really doesn't get a lot of traffic. People aren't really supposed to drive there anyhow. So it's not like you have to, I mean, people go out there every year to try to help the salamanders cross over there.
That's something that we can certainly look at when we get into the details
Seeker.
of the seeker and the environmental review.
Yep.
Let's keep that one in mind. So the next item, I believe, is regarding the EAF. Not identified other involved agencies, only identified the Ulster County Planning Board, which is an interested agency that has no approval authority of any aspect of the project. And I guess the question is, can you confirm that there are no other outside agency approvals that are required or parties that would be part of that? And given that the CRC doesn't have any sales tax relief, or maybe the ZBA for any variances that might be occurring.
Yes, we have an operating certificate requirement because we're adding units at the state, but in terms of, you know, any sort of public planning board infrastructure type organizations, IDA, governmental agencies, it's just limited to that New York State Certificate of Authority. They have no purview over the planning board type issues.
Well, it's not whether or not they have purview over the planning board type issues. It's whether or not they have any type of permitting over the project itself. So if you need state approval, state agency approval for this addition, they would necessarily be an involved agency. All it means is that would send out a notice of intent to them, and 30 days later, after they didn't answer it, that's all the obligation would be, because they certainly would not want to take over the seeker lead agency
So there
role.
are
But if
two
you
involved
don't,
agencies.
if you don't
then.
send it, then it's technically a jurisdictional defect of the board's decision. So we don't want to
Okay.
do that.
Okay,
So
so
if
then
you
there are
would send
technically
in-
two.
Okay, if you would send in a letter to Autumn indicating which of the agencies that are required to give this project approval, then we will include them on a notice of intent to be lead agency, and then we can button that up.
Very good.
Okay. Moving right along here. So I guess that really kind of covers most everything. Do we want to look at a coordinated review, Mr. Attorney?
Well, it will be a coordinated review by sending out the notice of intent to these
Got
two
it.
agencies. Right, they've confirmed that they're not getting any other public funding, and they don't need any variances. And so the only other involved agencies then would be these state regulatory agencies, whether or not it's Department of Health or Department of Insurance, however, whichever ones are the ones that oversee this. So when we get that in, we will send out a notice of intent. Our office can work with Autumn to get those sent out on a notice of intent.
Okay. So looking at that, then that has gone through the steps that we needed to cure. That's covered all of the issues. Anything outstanding, board members? Do you have anything outstanding at this point?
Nope.
Okay. So by my measure and looking at the notes that we have from the last several meetings, that leaves us at a point now where we're going to move on to the next application. We have some items that we'll be expecting from you. You have some information you'll be expecting us, including information regarding the maps, so that you can take a look at those, and referrals have been made to our engineer. So all of that will be coming back to us hopefully by the time we have our next meeting.
Well, on behalf of Woodland Pond, we thank you very much.
Thank you. We do appreciate
Mr.
it.
Chairman, I'm not sure all of this
Yep.
will be ready by the next meeting in
Okay.
2 weeks. Because the engineer has to get it, look through various things and issue a report. But certainly, if not, that'll be a meeting shortly thereafter.
Okay, well, let's see what he comes up with, and
Yep.
there we are. So we will see you at our next meeting at the public library.
Can I ask
Thank
a
you very
question
much.
before we go?
Certainly.
So we'll certainly have comments back from Ulster County Planning Board for your first meeting in May, maybe even for the next meeting. If we get comments back if you get everything from us and we get comments back from your engineer, when do you, is it premature to set a public hearing at this
It
point?
is.
Okay,
It is.
all right. So we'll hear from you all whether we need to come to your next meeting in April.
Very good.
Okay, thanks for your help.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.
Okay, so we are now going to be moving on to PB 21, 13, and 14, 54 South Manheim, Manheim Muse. Andy, you're here. Let's see, who else do we have for the applicants? Mr. Coppola, how are you?
Keith Leibolt's here.
Mr. Leibold, nice to see you. Okay. So here we are. Everyone's familiar with the summary. The board previously assumed lead agency status, reclassified the action as a type 1 action. The applicant did submit an FEAF Part 1, and the attorney will now prepare an FEAF Part 2. There is a new involved agency, which is a ZBA, and we need to make sure we send them a note of intent to be the lead agency. So at the 2/15/22 planning board meeting, the board referred the matter to the Ulster County Planning Board. Have we heard back from the Ulster County Planning Board on this?
No, it's on the calendar for tomorrow night.
Okay.
I think it might be helpful at this point for the applicant to explain what has happened when they went to the Board of Trustees and what's the path forward from there.
Sure. Andy, you want to give us a little bit of information about the status of the Board of Trustees density approval?
Sure, I'll actually hand that over to Keith because Keith was at that meeting and I was not at that meeting. But just to summarize what we submitted, as you know, we submitted quite a bit of information this round with full design plans with landscaping, lighting, stormwater pollution prevention plan, special use narrative. We really tried to come in with kind of soup to nuts, everything that's needed to try to keep this moving. We're also scheduled to be on the ZBA next week for the height variance for the aesthetic portion of the building. But as far as the village board, Keith, do you want to describe how that went?
Sure. We went to the board. We presented a formal concept plan, and the concept plan was reviewed and accepted, although there can be no formal action by the board until we have a secret determination. So according to the code, they then referred it back to the planning board. And it's my understanding that the same will happen at the zoning board, correct? We go there, but they can't make a determination until we have a secret determination. Then we'll go back to the village board of trustees and the zoning board, get our finals and come back to this board for final site plan.
Why don't we talk about the um, some other issues related to that. And Mr. Chairman, as I advised you, I'll make public here, I had a conversation with the applicant and Andy Willingham today concerning the issue of their exemption from Chapter 132. And the language is a little bit awkward in saying that you're exempt from Chapter 132 except for certain limited things. And it could be interpreted as saying that they're now cannot take advantage of the bonus density. It's the way that the language is written. I don't know that it's necessarily the intent, but you can't simply say, well, I think they intended this. In fact, in divining an interpretation of a statute, even if you had everybody who passed the law get before you and say, this is what we intended, that's not good enough. It has to be divined from the language itself in the code. So there was some discussions how to address this. Ashley and I also had a discussion later on today in trying to figure out a path forward that comports with the zoning language and yet tries to get at a reasonable intent of what the code likely intended. And the code clearly does say that you still are able to get bulk and area requirements adjusted either by the Board of Trustees or by the ZBA. With respect to the height, that was one of those bulk requirements that could have been done by the Board of Trustees, but the Board of Trustees preferred instead to have the ZBA address that matter, and that's what they're before the ZBA on. Bonus density is something that doesn't fit very well as a bulk requirement. But Ashley actually came up with an interesting way to review this, and that is that the bonus density is really nothing more than a modification of the square foot size for the dwellings. And if the applicant disagrees with this, let me know. But that it was really a product of the shrinking of the size of the dwellings that gave you more density as far as the number of units going from, I think it was 30 something to 51. So clearly square foot dwelling sizes is a bulk requirement. And so in our view, the Board of Trustees, or if not the ZBA, if the Board of Trustees doesn't want to do it, could modify those bulk requirements such that it would give you the same resulting density bonus of the 51 units. Now, unless the applicant sees a fly in the ointment in that view of the code language, then they can either get that modification from the Board of Trustees, or if the Board of Trustees wants to defer to the ZBA from the ZBA. So I wanted to hear from the applicant as to their response to that potential path.
Well, I think you need to articulate that, Rick, in a letter to the Board of Trustees and what your concern is with the zoning language and get feedback from them. I can tell you the concept we presented, which was a 51 unit site. They were affirmative, and referred it back to the planning board with us to proceed. So from their reaction, I would assume that it's positive for the project. And it's unfortunate how that particular language is written. And I understand you have to do what the code tells us. So if that's a path forward, I'd articulate that in a memo if I could ask that, because I don't think I could articulate it correctly to the mayor and the trustees, and I'll have a conversation with them.
I will draft such a memo.
Now, this memo is going to go to the Board of Trustees.
Yeah, it'll be to the Board of Trustees outlining the problem that I see with the code language and asking them to either confirm that they believe that when they gave their approval, they properly gave a bonus density allowable, or whether or not they concur with my reading of the code that they couldn't have done that, and that therefore the issue can be addressed via a modification to the bulk requirements of the dwelling square footage.
But Rick, they still couldn't act on that until we
They can't.
finish seeker, correct?
That's correct. That's correct. And that's why I also want to move forward on seeker, but you're right. But the issue can be addressed to them the same way that you addressed the notion that they had to first give conceptual approval, which they did, but you also obviously address the issue of the height variance, asking them that when they're allowed to after seeker, that they would address it that way. And they said, no, go to the ZBA, and this would be in this similar bucket.
Yeah.
So
And,
I will,
and
I will,
if I went to the ZBA with this, I'll just discuss what the reason for the variance might be.
yeah, I mean, you also have the ability to ask the ZBA to amend your application to give the variance that I'm suggesting, regardless of what the Board of Trustees does. So that's up to you and how you want to deal with that. There is one other zoning issue that I want to address, so that you may want to also amend for this purpose. And that is that there's a village code section, and I think this is under the new zoning, 212-41K7A. I think Andy is aware of this. That requires, in fact, I know he is, requires two means of vehicular access to the village streets. And in Andy's narrative, he indicates that two means of access is not necessary for safety and would only create additional impervious surfaces and decrease the aesthetics of the project, all of which I don't deny. But the fact of the matter is that that's not something that's waivable by the planning board. And it's not written in an aspirational tone. It says that it shall have the two means of vehicular access. Therefore, I think that you need a variance for that issue, and you make your case to the ZBA to get a variance for not having the otherwise required two means of vehicular access.
Understood.
The only possible workaround for that is showing we do have a sidewalk that's pervious pavement that accesses the road, and we could widen that so that it could, theoretically have another vehicle go down it and then do a mountable curb or something like that to show it on the plan as an access that you could use with a vehicle, not necessarily a full two-way access.
Well, there'd be two things that would be required there, Andy. One is you would first need to get the nod from Corey that he thinks that would comply with the code. And then secondly, the village planning board would have to say, yes, I think that's adequate. In addition to meeting the minimum, which is what you'd be asking Corey, to make sure that the planning board is comfortable with it. And then they may well be comfortable with it, but they're not going to decide that that's complies with the code, since it's not, your traditional type of second access. It doesn't say a primary and an emergency access, for instance, in which many times you would have mountable curbs and other things like that. But Corey may say that satisfies the code. And if Corey says that, then that's what the planning board has to follow. You're on mute, Andy.
Ah, maybe it's something I could show on the screen now just to see what the board feels about it.
Sure. Yep.
Go ahead.
So I get the intent of the code is to have two means of access. Since this one is, something like Woodland Pond where there's long roads coming in, this is only about 100 feet right here. So this is pavement here, and it's something that we could widen here and have it as so that a vehicle could go down and have a mountable curb coming out in an emergency. It would be a 1 lane, and then we can make, put some radiuses on here and widen it. And it would technically be vehicular access, I think is how it's written.
Mm-hmm. But that would be an emergency only access. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Yeah. If Corey gives the go ahead, then I'm fine with that. But would need something in writing from Corey that says that he agrees with that.
I mean, does the board have a preference here? When we originally looked at this, I understand what the code says and I understand the intent. It just seemed like overkill for this particular site. From an aesthetic standpoint, from a use standpoint, I realize that's not the greatest argument to make. I just look at it very commonsensical. It's a 2-lane entrance. We could spread the entrance and put a divider in the middle. What about that, Andy?
We could do that. We could also not plant any large trees. I think the whole idea is that, this entrance gets blocked for some reason. So, we could, this is going to be an open area with its lawn. We can plant trees that aren't large. There's different things.
Zach was very concerned about a buffer though, to prevent view shed of the building as you were going toward the village on 32, which is why we did that. I still want to make this thing that's this huge open pavement, access way, unless if the board feels it's needed, I certainly don't mind going to the ZBA and asking for relief given the condition of the property and the layout.
Why don't you try that first, and then if that doesn't work, then we can move to that second option.
Well, I think if Corey says that complies with the code for 2 access to a village street, they don't need to go to the ZBA.
Good point.
Andy, would you have to make any changes to that other entryway, or would it potentially comply as is?
I think if I would make it a little bit wider, I'd probably put some radiuses on here and put a mountable curb here. But then it would be accessible with a vehicle, so it wouldn't change a lot. And the ZBA is a possibility, but we already submitted an application around for next week. It didn't include this, so we'd be on it for the next month for that. But
we could poll the board since we're going there. I mean, it wouldn't preclude us from looking at the other option, but we could poll the ZBA, and really has to do with the constraints of the property and the building. See what they say. It's really up to this board with what your I don't have a preference, Mr. Chairman. It's whatever this board thinks would be most beneficial to the community.
Let's have Corey weigh in on this. And if he agrees, then it's fine. Otherwise, you're going to need to go to the ZBA to get the variance for that.
Okay.
But Corey's the first stop, and have him supply something written so that we can have it in the file. Okay, next item, parking calculation that we need to review. So
Where
based
we-
on the
yeah.
calculation, dwelling unit, 48 one-bedrooms at 0.65 space per unit. So 32 spaces there, 3 two-bedroom units at 0.85. So 3 units there, that's a total of 35. Overflow, 51 units times 0.25 spaces, 13. So total spaces in would be the 35 plus the 13 plus 2 for the resident managers, which would equal 50 spaces. Any issues with that?
We just think with the rounding, it needs one more space. And John just went over the calculations that we put forth.
Okay.
I can send those to you if that's a problem and you want to contest the way that we've calculated it, Andy. And we can work through that with the planning board. But if it's not a problem, providing that additional space, then just provide it. But I can send you our calculations on that.
That's fine. We will add a space.
Okay.
Next item is reasonable access to conveniences and facilities. Mr. Attorney, you want to kind of walk us through what that actually means and what the conveniences are?
Yeah,
What the facilities are?
And what this, I think that you're going to find that the applicant has already thought through this and is providing this, but we're going to have something in the notes or something that would show that you're meeting this requirement, and it's in 212 41 K 8B. And I'll read it. It's 2 run-on sentences. But it's something that I know Mr. Leibold has thought about all of these things, and I'm sure has a response for it. It says senior citizen development sites shall provide residents with reasonable access to such conveniences and facilities as public transportation, hospital and medical services, shopping, religious, cultural and recreational facilities, and personal services. Reasonable access shall mean that such conveniences and facilities are available within 1/4 mile of the development, or that the owner of the development has made provision for regularly scheduled shuttle-type transportation service to such facilities. So the board has to confirm that that's going to be taken care of as part of this project because it's a requirement. And so we just need some kind of proof that that's going to happen. So I'll let the applicant address it.
We have. Tell me what you need as proof of that, and we'll gladly provide it.
I think probably the best way for both enforcement and otherwise is to have some plan notes saying how you're going to comply with that particular section of the code. You know, that your plan note saying that you're going to go ahead and have shuttle services to this hospital, these medical facilities, et cetera.
Okay. I'm going to have to go back and check with Housing and Community Renewal on what they're going to allow us to do. They've got some strict requirements as well. I don't know that it can be a private shuttle transportation, but we can certainly provide transportation by request of the residents for those services.
Well, why don't you take a look at it and see?
Yeah.
And
Yep.
take a look at your other requirements and see if you can comply with this. And if not, then we'll have to address it in some way.
Absolutely.
Okay. The next item we have is the affordable housing chapter 132 requirements. Mr. Attorney, you want to lead that discussion?
On which one are you talking about?
Number 7, the applicant indicated the project is exempt. Funding according.
That's what we talked about earlier,
Okay.
about being exempt from the density bonus, and
Oh, yes. Okay.
the way to handle it, we think, and it was decided I was going to draft
Yep.
a memo to the Board of Trustees.
Okay.
Now, are you receiving any, just to try to get seeker review addressed as quickly as possible, are you receiving any public funding for this project?
Yes.
Can you send to, similar to what we did with the last application, please send to Autumn, identifying which public, federal or state agencies that you're going to be receiving funding from. We will then have to send out a notice of intent of our lead agency, so that we're covered there. Obviously, they're not going to want to take on seeker, but we need to go through that process since they are involved agencies as a funding agency.
Did we send that out, Andy? I thought we,
I don't remember seeing it, but it's possible in some narrative that you
Yeah.
included it.
Anthony, I thought, Anthony Capola, I thought didn't we talk about that and send a notice out to HCR? You're muted.
We did talk about it when we had the TA meeting with the environmental people at HCR. I think that's when it came up. And yeah, that's when it came up. I don't remember how we resolved it. Maybe you'll just look back at the application and see what was submitted to them.
Yeah. But certainly, Mr. Chairman, we'll take care of that immediately.
Yeah, we just need to know the specific agency so we, and their address, so we can send the notice of intent, that's all.
Yep. I'll circle back around with you, Anthony, tomorrow.
Okay. Moving along. Let's see. We did receive the SWIP, so we want to get the village engineer to review the SWIP. So I need a motion to have our village engineer review the SWIP plan.
So motioned.
Second,
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
So the motion's approved to have village engineer review the SWIP. Okay. Next thing, we did receive a traffic study from Andy. I appreciate you letting me know about that. And while I looked at it, it's beyond my expertise. So that begs the question of whether we should have our traffic consultant, the previous traffic consultant that we had, review the traffic study. What are the thoughts from the board on that? Any thoughts? No thoughts? Okay. Well, it's my consideration that I would like to have our previous traffic consultant to review that. The name of our traffic consultant is escaping me at the moment. Do you remember that?
Yes, DTS PDE,
DTS.
Carlito Holt.
That's it. So I would like then to get a motion to hire DTS and Carlito Holt to review the traffic study that was provided by the applicant's engineer and give us his thoughts on the study and if it meets the needs and requirements.
So motioned.
Second,
Second,
all in favor?
aye.
So we will have DTS review the traffic study. Okay. So there are a few items that were previously raised and that remain outstanding. Mr. Attorney, you want to lead us through that, or I can just go through them very quickly here?
Yeah, I think we've addressed most of these.
I think so too.
We need a determination by Corey with respect to the 2.5 versus 3-story issue. We discussed that at the last planning board meeting.
Did get that, Mr. Chairman. I'm sorry if the planning board doesn't have it.
Yeah, we didn't get that. At least I didn't see it. I guess I could have missed it, but I looked at things today. All right. So what did Corey say?
I said it complied with the 2.5 stories. The design was compliant.
Can you send that over to Autumn so that we can get that done, add that part of the file?
Yes.
Andy, there was a small issue. I haven't notes here from Ashley, is that it deals with the existing single-family home. Two of the plan sheets were corrected, saying that it's proposed for lot 1, not lot 2, but apparently it was corrected on SP1 and SP4, but didn't on SP3. So if you could just check that out.
Okay.
Referencing the right lot. That's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
So the issue regarding the bulk table has been resolved.
Yeah, I have action to do on that.
Okay. All right. So it appears that we've gone through this fairly well. Waiting on the FEIF part 2 so we can do seeker. We have some notes for our attorney. I think we have a punch list for Andy. Andy, are you clear on everything that needs to be completed here? New punch list?
Yes, I think so. There wasn't a whole lot for me to do, but yes, I have noted the 4 or 5 things. Yes.
Okay. We'll try to coordinate with Autumn and make sure we have all the details of who needs to do what so we can keep this flowing and moving forward. Okay.
We'll make an effort, Mr. Chairman, to meet with the neighbors and see what their concerns are, and hopefully we can address them with some proper screening and landscaping.
Yeah, I'm sure you will, and I really appreciate you guys doing that. That means a lot and it buys a lot to pay attention to the neighbors. So thank you for doing that, and we'll look forward to what you have on that. Other than that, I think that's it for this evening for you guys. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me or Autumn. Probably best to go through Autumn. She can generally find me, and we can get all of this wrapped up and taken care of as quickly as possible.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. So the next is the PB 2203 5 Plattekill site plan from New Paltz Realty, Keenan. Got the summary on this. This is to address issues that were raised at the 215 meeting. Seeker type 2 action. There was a referral to the Ulster County Planning Board, so I'm going to assume that they're going to touch base with it on, as there are a couple of other items on the meeting tomorrow. Is that correct? Did we receive anything back from Ulster County Planning Board?
Nothing back from Ulster County Planning Board.
So they'll probably be looking at that tomorrow. We have a public hearing scheduled for the 19th. ZBA granted the variance a long time ago. So we're down to kind of some next steps and then some issues that need to be cured. So let's hear from the applicant if you would go through the site plan modifications for us.
Sure. So basically, this last task was really going through the new code. You know, the code changed since we got the previous approval. So we went through. We had Rick's list of all the different code items, and we went through them, you know, point by point, and changed some notes, and a lot of them are really kind of minor changes, and we noted them on the plan and put a revision cloud around them so we know what changed since the approval last November. But hopefully we addressed them all, and we'll see what you guys think.
Okay. So footnote in the parking table at the bar restaurant, proposed parking. Got that one taken care of. Is that correct? That was done too.
Yep.
Okay, zoning information table.
Yes, we did. We edited. Let's see. Yes, we did all the changes that Rick requested on the plan.
Okay. So Historic Preservation Committee must review the proposed changes. You did go before them, and I did receive the email where they approved of it, so that's taken care of. So we come to the sidewalk site plan should include a broad sidewalk, street trees, and a bicycle lane is provided in the village code. Village and town complete streets policy, which again came up after it was previously approved. Your response, I believe, stated that the property has 41 feet of frontage along Plattekill Avenue, which is fully encompassed by the site's existing entrance. So any thoughts on that from members of the board? Okay.
The most of these that we're going to be going through in the next few are not absolute requirements. They are framed in that the site should do this, it should do that. But subject to the existing conditions. So they are not absolutes. So for instance, that's the case with respect to having a broad sidewalk, street trees, and a bicycle lane. Obviously, this site, a pre-existing site, cannot accommodate that. And so I think you just take note of the fact that it can't comply with that requirement, even though it is not a requirement, but a suggestion that it ought to do that. But it really can't. They can't put a broad sidewalk and street trees and a bicycle path in front of their facility. In a similar fashion, it said you should have a stub connection to access future parking in adjacent lots. But again, the site constraints really dictate that this can't be done under these circumstances because of the elevation changes. I'm trying to think of some other ones that are in here.
The architectural features and windows shall be continued on all sides of the building that are clearly visible from the street, or parking areas to avoid visible blank walls. The existing rear wall faces the private parking lot. It's not proposed to have any new windows because the owner needs that wall space for kitchen mechanical storage and bar shelving. Wall finish painted brick to match the rest of the building. Not left as exposed concrete block.
Let me get that in the code.
Yeah, because that's one where it does not appear the planning board has discretion to waive this requirement, so. Looking for a resolution.
I have this down as F3E, but F3E doesn't talk about this, about the windows. You know where that is, Andy?
I think it's F,
4E, okay.
4E, yeah.
It's not 3E, it's 4E. So it says building design standards. And says architectural features and windows shall be continued on all sides of a building that are clearly visible from the street or parking areas to avoid visible blank walls. So that's set forth in mandatory terms. Is there any way that you can do that?
It's kind of a bit of an impasse there. It says shall.
Right.
Yeah, so architectural features and windows shall be continued. So it needs architectural features and windows.
Right.
I guess, you know, I don't think they'd want,
Well, you have that on the street side, right?
yeah, the street side is, yeah.
So the only issue is in the back, the parking area. They don't want a blank wall. So what architectural feature and windows can you put there?
Does it have to be architectural feature and windows, or can it be an architectural feature or a window?
It says and windows.
Darn.
We'll have to come up with something. I guess it's not overly specific. It's really, you know, it's looking at a parking lot back there, but it is, does refer to being visible from parking lots. We'll have to talk to the project architect and come up with something, right, Brian?
So being said or instead of and. Okay. Mechanical equipment for the ground mounted or roof mounted shall be completely screened from adjacent properties in the street in a way is consistent with the architecture of the main building. You responded that any mechanical equipment will be wall mounted and placed on the south or west side of the building. Applicant should indicate how the mechanical equipment will be screened. Can you have us give us that, Andy, or is that something we're gonna need to have at the next meeting?
So it says either ground mounted or roof mounted, and these would be wall mounted. So technically they wouldn't apply, but they would be in the back. Next to, there's some space next to that parking lot.
Wanna weigh in on that, Mr. Attorney?
Yeah, I don't think you can easily get around it simply by saying that it's on a wall, Andy. It says all mechanical equipment. Then it says whether ground mounted or roof mounted. But it doesn't say ground mounted or roof mounted shall be screened. It says all mechanical equipment.
Okay.
And I think the way that it's going to reasonably be interpreted, this one is a zoning code, so this would be interpreted by Corey. So it's not like the chapter 132 interpretations we're talking about. So if Corey says that he likes your interpretation, which I'd be surprised at, but if he does, then that's fine. And if not, then you'll have to come up with some screening.
Okay.
So if Corey does approve that, let's get that in writing, please.
Yep.
And there's requirements for lighting, and Andy has submitted a lighting plan and specifications, so the board just has to be happy with them. So I would suggest that the board hasn't looked at it in detail, that they should before the next meeting to make sure that you're satisfied with the lighting plan that Andy submitted.
I'll be honest that I have not looked at it. So you have submitted that, Andy, if you can bear with us to get that studied and ready for the next meeting.
Sure. Yeah, it's pretty simple. It's only three lights, I think. So, but yeah, it's in there. It's in the set.
Street furniture, public waste receptacles approved by the planning board shall be provided along street frontages and within the site deemed necessary by the planning board. Shall be maintained by the developer or managing agent of the property. Property has 41 feet of frontage along Platico Avenue, which is fully encompassed by the site's existing entrance. Planning board should determine whether or not it's necessary to have street furniture and waste receptacles in light of this response. So give us a little more thorough explanation here, Andy, and tell us why we should or should not.
So that comment seemed to us to relate to like a public street frontage where people are walking down the street, and then you would provide things like garbage cans and benches and things, where this property really doesn't have any frontage. The only frontage it has is the full entrance, and there's not really anywhere to put things.
Any members of the board want to weigh in on that?
Yeah, that makes sense to me. I mean, you know, we when we're looking at this in the context of trying to put a sidewalk in, it was the same issue. It's like there's not any room there other than just the entryway. So that makes sense from my reading of it.
I feel the same. It seems fine to me.
Okay. So, Mr. Attorney, do you advise that we make a motion that we approve of, or that that is, in this case, it is not necessary to have street furniture and waste receptacles, given that
Yeah,
property.
there should be, but this is something that, as deemed necessary by the planning board, but also if you wanted to, if you wanted to try to at least have a nod to the requirement for public receptacles and public furniture, there is an outside area in the back. I don't know if you want to require a public waste receptacle in the back there to try to show that you're trying to comply at least with, if not the letter, the intent of trying to keep the place in a neat area, and also if they can put a bench there. But that's going to be up to the board, but you should make that finding however you feel.
So this would be the back of the building, the one that's facing the parking area in the back. Is that correct?
Yeah, although it says street furniture and public waste receptacles shall be provided along street frontages and within the site. So it's not only really, the way I read it, as along street frontages. So if the board wanted to require something in the back there, they would have the right to do that. It's whether or not you think it's needed.
Thoughts on that, guys? Thoughts on that, Rachel?
I'd like to just walk over there one more time then. I'd like to, yeah, because, I mean, you don't know what, I mean, you don't know if the place is gonna be, what's behind the place is gonna be the same way forever. And you still have people there, people are still walking around there.
Okay. Thoughts from
I
other
mean,
members?
Can I interject for a moment? The
I,
back of
I
the-
don't,
The back of the property is lined with parking spaces from Bobby Down's property. So the entire back of the building, there are parking spaces that go right up to my building.
yeah, no, okay, yeah, no, I know what you're talking about. Yeah, it's not very nice looking. I
Yeah,
mean,
but
that's where the
it's
dumpsters
his
are
lot.
and,
Yeah.
what?
It's his lot, and his lot comes right to my building.
Yeah, I don't know if there's any way, I mean, because, yeah, he's the one with the big dumpsters then, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Those are his big
Andy, why don't you
dumpsters.
put up the
Your
site?
property.
Andy, can you put up the site?
Yeah, I think, Rick, I think you were talking about near the entrance to the restaurant, I thought, right?
Right.
Okay.
All right, let me just bring it up 1 second.
So it's not off-site stuff. It says within the site. So it's whatever is your property
So
site.
behind the building then is, can you blow that up a little bit, Andy, to make it a little more clear?
Yeah. So, all right. So you guys were just talking about back here in Bobby Downs behind the building, but I think, Rick, you were talking about in here somewhere, right?
That's correct. Yes.
Okay. So is this?
So a garbage can, like somewhere around, or a public waste receptacle, sorry, somewhere around here would be the idea?
It's up to the board as to where they think it would be needed and whether or not any street furniture, like a bench or something like that, is needed.
All right, so the patio area is to the, in
That
this
whole area there.
everything there, okay. And then adjacent to that would be the, there's my poles there, proposed concrete planters. That would be in the area there.
Is there room between the bike rack and the steps down to the municipal parking lot for a trash can?
Yeah, I would think.
Because I guess if one was going to go, that would make sense because that's one of the main means of getting in and out of the site. And it's not like it's too close to where people are sitting and eating.
So we could probably put a waste receptacle there, but there's no opportunity to place a bench in that area.
No, and I think the reason this actually got a lot bigger for the new code, there's 12 bike spaces per the code now. So this is pretty big. I don't think there would be room for both because you would be covering up. These are all planters with all kinds of landscaping in them. So I don't really want to cover that up, but
No. Okay, so let's see if you can place one at the corner of the stairwell and the bike rack.
all right. Are you fine? Are you okay with that, Brian?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
Is that okay with everybody else on the board?
Yep.
Okay, Tom, thank you for pointing that out. That's a good area. So that's going to be where we're going to target that. And that would put you in compliance with the.
So then there's a number of items that require that the planning board feel comfortable with the requirements of the code concerning parking, and I'll go, there's, I think, 4 of them. And Andy believes that he's addressed these, and it's just up to the planning board to formally say, yes, that's fine, and then that part will be done. So the first is, these are all under section 212-13 F14. Parking shall not dominate any site when viewed from the street. Large uninterrupted areas of parking stalls that significantly reduce the continuity or quality of natural open space shall not be permitted. You know, you have to look at this in the context, obviously, of the property that you're dealing with. So do people believe that the parking doesn't dominate the site when viewed from the street?
I guess I don't see it being any different than it was before.
Yeah, there's no real
in-
change. There's a huge
in
parking lot
fact,
at the bottom.
Yeah, in fact, it's improved, I guess, because it's what was once Spaces is now Cafe. So I don't think it's not a problem for me.
All right, so unless anybody posed any objections, we'll just consider that the board is satisfied with these standards. Interior parking, not landscaping. Interior parking lots shall be landscaped as determined necessary by the planning board. And I think you've addressed those.
Right.
A landscape strip shall be provided around the perimeter of the parking lots, exclusive of driveways. Landscape strip should be a minimum of 3 feet wide. Where appropriate, a berm or other appropriate screening should be used to buffer parking areas from the street.
So again, the same kind of idea. What was a parking lot that didn't have any landscaping is now a smaller parking lot and extensively landscaped around 2 sides with plantings and decorative brick columns.
Yeah, you're
Yeah,
basically
I'm
bring one
okay with that. I mean, this is-
parking lot.
Say that again, Rachel?
You're basically buffering one parking lot from another parking lot, not really from the street.
Right.
But it's the view from the street that is the concern, though, right? And the municipal parking lot is not part of this property, so essentially, this is buffering the parking lot, this property's parking lot from the street view. Because there's nothing you guys can do about it's not like you're gonna buffer the municipal parking lot.
Right.
And then lastly, I think that you just have to be satisfied. There's a number of requirements. I won't go through them all, but you have to be satisfied with the landscaping plan. And it's compliance with 212-13 F16. So you may want to look at that before the next meeting.
Yeah, that's gonna be our next meeting. So we have 2 items that we need to work on before the next meeting, and one is the landscaping plan.
And the lighting plan.
And the lighting. Need to be studied before our next meeting with them, okay? All right, board, everyone square on that?
Yep.
Okay. So you have the list of the things that need to be completed. We have our study list for the next one, and anything else that you think we need to address, Andy?
No, I don't think so. I think we got our list, and we'll see you at the public hearing.
Very good.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Good
Thanks,
job.
guys.
Good job.
All right, moving to the next one, PB 2204, formerly PB 1911. It's 184 Main Street. Revised application for site plan, special use permit to demolish an existing building and associate appurtenances and construct a 3-story, 15,312 square foot restaurant hotel building with a new parking area on a 0.414 acre property located along Main Street in the B2 Core Business District. 100-seat restaurant on the main floor, accessory outdoor cafe, 12-room hotel on the second and third floors, rooftop deck, and a storage basement. This is an unlisted action, which I believe you typed it during the last meeting when I was not here. Is that correct? Was the seeker typed at the last meeting?
I don't have notes for the last meeting.
I
This
would,
is the first appearance.
yeah,
The last meeting was what, 2019?
2000. I'm sorry, yeah, our earlier application was, I believe, 2019.
Right.
This has been updated. This seeker has been updated, and the submission has been updated to comply with the current zoning.
So Rick, do we need to retype this, or can that extend over from 2019?
It can extend over as far as the seeker goes. The question is, unless there is been some changes in there that would elevate it. Why don't you ask the applicant to go over all of the changes
Yeah.
that have been made?
Why don't we start with that? Why don't you just give us a full presentation on it, any of the changes that have been made, and we can make a determination, get it referred over.
Sure. Everyone has the submitted drawings and site plans and renderings. I can share them on my screen if that's useful.
Yes, that's useful.
I think it would be good, Sam.
All right.
There's others who haven't seen it.
There we go. Everyone can see. We can see that. So we are submitting to build a boutique hotel with a first floor restaurant, an outdoor cafe in the front, and a roof deck on the roof. Our initial submission back in 2019, or rather, let me just say the changes that we've made, it complies with revised zoning at this point. We've increased the building size to take the opportunity that allowed by the zoning setbacks. So we've sort of been able to move the building a little more closer to the parking lot side on the left. And let me flip to the site plan here. So sort of taking the opportunity of the revised zoning, we are at the property line, which is adjacent to a parking lot and sort of closer to the street. We've expanded the building footprint, which is helping us create better accommodations for the hotel guests and making certain our egress stairs and elevator work. We've revised our landscape plan as per the revised zoning. And I believe our roof deck has decreased in its percentage overall of the space upstairs. Beyond that, our goal is still sort of an architectural design that is evokes the more of the sort of the downtown village, with the sort of overall goal of really expanding the walkable village footprint.
So just to clarify what you're seeing, the building is adjacent to what one might call a convenient deli parking. It's at the site of the former Moxie Cupcake, for those who don't recall.
Oh, okay.
And so this plan is Main Street. And that's a view from.
This is a photo insert of the building into the location of the Moxie Cupcake. Shown here to the right here is the
awareness shop.
What is the name of that?
Shop.
Yep.
Awareness shop.
Awareness shop.
Yeah.
The modifications and the architectural detailing, we've made slight modifications from the initial submission till now. And those include, we've increased the size of the balconies so that they are where they were initially just, balconies with a railing. Now they're balconies that people can walk out on. Additionally, as the building got bigger, we have sort of a bit of a jog in the front of the facade, which is just to sort of really, it gives us better egress, and it also keeps the proportion of the building a little more vertical and appealing, I guess would be my description of that.
Do you recall what the footprint was in 29 application?
The footprint was 3,000 square feet, which was the limit at the time.
I remember there being a lot of drainage issues at that site. That there's 2 cisterns in the parking lot that collect all the water, and that the egress from the cisterns periodically gets blocked, and the area back there gets flooded, and then the whole area just downhill from it gets flooded. The yard of the place next door of the awareness shop. Are you familiar with any of those issues? I know they looked into that a couple of years ago.
Andy, if you were still on the line, Andy's the civil engineer on the project and developed the grading plan. Andy, are you
here? So I was not aware of that story. We did do some soil testing. It's going on a couple of years ago now, but to test the soil, and then we're adding to the existing dry wells, and it did perk, and we're adding to the existing dry wells, and I believe we're decreasing impervious surface as well. But I would, whatever that issue was, is that something that you observed or something that you heard, or?
It was an issue that the village was working on. There were a couple of people who were working on it because they had the idea that because so much water comes through there and then runs down the hill, and then it comes out like on Plattekill Avenue, and then it runs into the pit. And so they were looking at all different ways that they could sort of curtail that runoff. And apparently there are 2 cisterns that they said, this is what I was told, that there are 2 cisterns under that parking lot, and that they would work if they were maintained.
Yeah, there's 2 dry wells with the holes in the side, and there previously was no overflow going out to the catch basin at the road, which we're going to add as part of this. So it'll definitely be a better system. Plus, there'll be more dry wells. But I'm happy to talk to Blue Terwilliger about it and see where his thoughts are.
Okay. Was talking at one point of using that water to maintain trees, to keep to be able to grow trees that would use the water. I don't know. That was what they were talking about. This is, I guess, about, I don't know, I want to say 10 or 12 years ago.
Water, trees on this site, water from this site?
Yeah, that was something that was being discussed with some people on the tree, people who are no longer on the tree commission, who are on it, the shade tree commission. Because there's so much water, like a lot of water comes down from there and just runs down, because it's at the sort of the top of the steep hill, and there's underground streams there, and that's one of the issues that they've been working on in the village, is to try to control some of that runoff.
I wonder if, Andy, if your office is across the street from this, have you experienced or witnessed excessive water in there in severe rain conditions?
Well, it floods the backyard of the awareness shop. So you could talk to them.
Okay, I can try and talk with them.
This plan essentially doubles the infiltration structures and removes and replaces the two that are there with.
Oh, okay.
So it's essentially 4 instead of 2. And the grading changes in such a way that any peak storm outflow would discharge onto the street. And I don't know what level of rain that would be, but it's a really drastic event. I'm imagining a lot of the stormwater issues are also related to the complete lack of pervious area on the adjoining property. This will have to deal with some of that as well.
Yes.
The adjoining, you mean the property at the corner of 32
yeah.
and Main?
Yeah,
For the whole convenient deli mall,
Right.
main,
Parking lot and mall.
completely,
Right.
complete, huge impervious surface. the whole thing.
yeah.
Anything else? Nope.
Anything else from us? Well, I mean, or I'm sorry, I apologize. Are you talking for us or to other members of the
No,
board?
no, from you. Is anything else you'd like to lead us through?
Well, we met with the Historic Preservation Committee back in the initial submission and reviewed I guess the aesthetics of the project. I
Of the
believe
original project or the new project?
of the original project. I don't know if there would be much from a aesthetic difference between then and now. We haven't presented it to them at this point. At that time, I believe it was just sort of an additional step we were taking just to sort of have them have their sort of acceptance or approval. Though I don't believe that was required at the time.
Okay. All right. Well, it's an interesting project. Rick, I know you've got quite a few notes here on things that need to be done related to this. So if you want to go ahead and start on those.
Well, the board can go ahead and reconfirm the seeker classification is unlisted. When we send something to the Ulster County Planning Board, though, we need to be sending the correct EAF to them. There's some things that we need to decide to finalize the EAF, and I assume that Andy, you were the one that's involved with this or not?
No, we developed the EAF.
Okay. There's a couple of things. One, I don't know if there are any other outside agency approvals that are necessary for this. So you need to advise the board so we know whether or not this is going to be a coordinated EAF or not. I mean, a coordinated seeker review or not. So you're going to have to decide that and talk with your engineer and decide whether or not any other approvals are necessary. In the EAF that you have, you indicate that the county planning board is an involved agency, but they're really not. It's just a recommending one, so they should not be listed as an involved agency. When we get a corrected EAF, which means you correct that part of it, but also just confirm whether or not there's any other involved agencies, we can refer it to the Ulster County Planning Board, and also you need to seek review from the Historic Preservation Commission. But really, the one thing that I look at as a threshold issue, and that is under the village code, development of a third story shall be limited to residential uses. You have a hotel. So that would require Corey to interpret that as saying a hotel is a residential use. That's a pretty significant determination by Corey, because it would then mean that every hotel is a residential use, may have impacts on hotels being put in residential districts if they're residential uses. So before this board can approve it, because I would think that the conventional way to look at a hotel would be that it would be a commercial use, not a residential use. But we're not the ones to make that determination. Corey is. And so you need to get a determination from Corey, and Corey has to have a written determination on this because it's rather substantial. And he may have qualifications to his determination, and he may have just a straightforward determination. I don't know, but that's all within Corey's jurisdiction to determine. But as it stands now from our plain reading, at least my plain reading, and I think the chairman agrees with me, and see if the other planning board members do, that a hotel is not a residential use, it's a commercial use. And if
No.
so, then you can't have a hotel on the third floor.
It does seem, and I spoke briefly with Corey about this yesterday. There's a conflict in the language here, as far as it seems that, you know, if there's a two-story hotel with a permissible use below, would then be a three-story building, whereas and a hotel and a residential use. So a hotel is an allowable commercial use, and residential above that does not quite doesn't make sense. I think that's a tough read on that. So I would have
I don't
to.
think it's a tough read from reading the language. It may not make sense from the point of view of good planning, but that's not for this board to determine. That'd be up to the Board of Trustees if it needs to change that. But in the first instance, it's a determination by Corey whether or not your project, which has what I believe to be a commercial use on the third floor, is inconsistent with the 212-13F7 that says that the third story shall be limited to residential uses.
Just a quick weigh-in is that I agree with that. I believe that the hotel is a commercial use and that the third floor is not a residence. And so that is, again, like you said, something that Corey's going to have to weigh in on. But just from my reading of it, it seems evident that that's what it's stating. Any other members of the board want to weigh in on that?
Yeah, that makes sense to me, that a hotel would not be considered a residential use.
Yeah, I don't think we want to say that the hotel is a residential use, but I think that there's additional conflicts in the language. So I guess, but having Corey weigh in on this and sort of see, I guess I'm uncertain if that's the only interpretation on that scenario, but.
Well, I would add then that the building code classifies hotels as a residential use, but that's may not be what the intent of the village board was. Well, so I guess we need to.
I would say that building code, the state building code talks about it in that way. Every zoning code that I'm aware of refers to hotels as commercial uses. That doesn't mean that Corey couldn't interpret it, or the Board of Trustees couldn't even clarify it, that they consider to be hotel to be residential uses, but this board can't make those types of determinations. So although we could start to refer things, I think we need to get that issue straightened out first.
Okay, that makes sense.
So if Corey does not classify the hotel as a residential use, then what occurs then from our attorney here?
Say that again, John.
So if they don't declare it as a residential use, what occurs then?
Well, you wouldn't be able to approve it because that would be a commercial. You're saying if Corey finds that
No,
hotels are a commercial use?
No, if Corey does not classify the hotel use as a residential use, then could they ask for a variance?
Well, they could ask for a variance. I'd leave it up to the ZBA as to whether or not they'd be entitled. There are some issues. The fact that it says that it should be a residential use is limited on the third floor. Potentially, they could ask for a use variance, which is unlikely to be gotten given the standard for use variances under the state of New York.
Yeah, we're not, that's,
Yeah, there's also an issue in zoning that zoning boards of appeals can't change the code in a way that is really legislating the code. They can only grant variances to it without having the effect of generally rewriting the code on a much larger scale and therefore legislating. So I'll leave that issue to the zoning board. But I think we just need to get the opinion of Corey, see what it is, and then we'll react from there.
Very good. Okay.
the
Well-
procedure, is the procedure for that you sort of refer this to Corey or?
No,
we-
not usually. Usually you would send a written request to Corey. Since this is a pretty significant issue, you could, you would point out to Corey that section 212.13 F7 says development of a third story shall be limited to residential uses. We believe that this does not prohibit our situation for the following reasons, but the planning board has asked us to get an opinion from you as to whether or not that prohibition applies to what we want to do on our third story.
Okay.
And just copy the planning board on that letter to Corey, please.
Do we want to go over any of the other items on the list, or we just need to wait until we hear from Corey?
Yeah, I think we need to wait.
Yeah.
Because if that changes, then other things may change along here. You certainly can go ahead and take a vote to reconfirm the seeker classification as an unlisted action. They can get the EAF ready. And if that the threshold issue gets resolved, we can start circulating to any involved agencies, or you can assume lead agency at that point in time if there are no other involved agencies.
Okay, so with that in mind, I'd like to get a motion to declare this as an unlisted action.
So motion.
What's that? I'm sorry?
Tom, so
I
moved.
said,
Okay, so I'm asking for a motion to classify the action as an unlisted action under seeker.
so motioned.
Second on that?
Second,
All in favor?
Aye.
So it is now unlisted, declared an unlisted action. Applicant will prepare an FEAF to on the property. So we are now just going to have to wait until we hear from Corey. I mean, it's a beautiful rendering. It looks like a very interesting project. But it all comes down to how he declares it, whether it third floor is a residential or whether it is a commercial use. So.
All right, so we'll reach out to Corey formally and we will CC the planning board in that
Please do,
request.
and
Thank
yeah,
you.
please do. That's really kind of our next step. Okay, so moving on now, we are at PB 2205, 1721 Church Street. It's an application for a special use permit approval to establish a cafe use at 1721 Church Street. Board game cafe, that sounds interesting. Per Corey's 331 memo, the use is retail business not otherwise mentioned. So why don't you, the applicant is here.
How's it going, guys?
Hello. So if you guys can just walk us through things.
So we are planning on opening a board game cafe. So we're gonna have 150 plus games to come and play. You can pay a library fee, and you'll have access to all the games for as long as you want for the whole day. We're not gonna go into like a full restaurant, even though we have the full kitchen there because everything is already set up from the last business that was there. but our main focus is going to be coffee and then board games, Dungeons and Dragons, Magic the Gathering. I found out recently from Corey that I guess back in the day there used to be a card shop on that street that did something similar to that, which was interesting. That's our basic premise of the business.
Okay. So what we'll need to do is classify this action as a type 2 under seeker. We'll have to look at the memo that Corey had. Because there's going to be an issue regarding the site plan requirements. And then we've got some issues regarding compliance with the outdoor cafe special use permit. Then we need to decide if an escrow account, so set up an escrow account. So with that in mind, I want to get a motion to classify the project as a type 2 action under seeker.
So moved.
Second,
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
The motion is passed. Corey, memo. I'm trying to find the memo that Corey had. Does anyone have that handy?
Yeah, John, I've got it. You want me to email it to you?
If you want to use it, to
I
share
just
the,
emailed it to you, John.
Okay.
I'm sorry, Autumn.
Just emailed it to you.
Okay.
I could just share screen if you want.
Yeah, why don't we go ahead and do that?
Okay.
Okay. Applicant submitted a floor plan not prepared by a registered design professional. Requires all plans to be prepared by a registered design professional.
John, I'll have to quit I'll have to sign out to share my screen, so maybe that's not going to work.
Hang on, let me do something here. Hold on.
Okay.
I'm going to try to share my screen. I've got it up.
Okay. Okay, so there is the site plan. So the comments that Corey made, it says they reviewed the application supplemental material from Robert Gamble for consideration of a special use permit to establish a cafe use at the 1721 Church Street. Comments are as follows. Applicant submitted a floor plan that is not prepared by a registered design professional. The planning board should discuss if the submitted document is appropriate enough to conduct a review and make an informed decision without the need of a registered design professional. Floor plan presented no issues for our review and was sufficient for our purposes. So that's the first thing that we need to determine is, do we want to accept the drawing, which is there, or do we want to request that they get it from a registered design professional? Thoughts, board?
I don't know. There aren't any changes really to the, wait, you can't hear me.
No, we can hear you. I don't think there's many changes to that house for 20 years.
I mean, if it's sufficient for, it was sufficient for Corey. I'm not sure. I mean, if it's good enough for Corey, it's good enough for me.
Okay. So.
I mean, is there anything specific besides the fact that it wasn't prepared by a licensed architect? Like, is it missing required information, like scale? Oh, there you go. And the Church Street is at the bottom of this
Correct.
diagram, right? Okay.
And Huckleberry would be out the top.
Right.
So for the purposes that you have for simply showing layouts, are you doing any, you're moving any walls, doing any changes of that nature?
The only thing we're changing is if you look at the entrance when you walk in and kind of the middle of the drawing to the left, that counter. The only thing we're changing is where the counter, yeah, that counter right there. The old counter that's there right now is if you go north, right past the door to the left, that's where the old counter is. We're just changing the counter just because the espresso machine we have is too big for that old counter there.
Okay.
And that's it.
That's it.
It's the only
No,
thing
no structural changes.
Nope.
Okay. So the next item is, so does everyone agree that this is acceptable? I'm finding it acceptable, so.
John, the only thing I'm looking for, and I can't really find it, is it's usually the case that a site plan required to be submitted by a registered official, a licensed official by the state of education department. And then it should include certain elements. And it's usually that the elements are waived, not whether or not it's submitted by a licensed professional. I can't find that right now. I'm just concerned. I'm not so much concerned about this application as I am concerned about setting a precedent that you are allowing that to occur.
So what elements would we be looking at? in the site
Because
plan?
in a site plan under 212-23A, there are, one is where it says it has to be prepared by a legally qualified individual or firm, and it has to contain the following information. And then it's A through P of all the information. So, location and size, floor plans, elevations, location of sidewalks, walkways, buffer areas, screening, general location, location of buildings and sites within 100 feet. A lot of things. And it's appropriate on a very simple application to waive a lot of those things. I just am a little bit concerned about waiving the license, professional drawing it.
Well, it wasn't my intent to waive the licensed professional drawing it as such. I know that it requires a number of these different items. Applicants, are you aware of all the items that are required, or is?
I was given the sheet that had all of the stuff required on there. A lot of it wasn't applicable that I did notice. There was things that I probably could have put on there that I didn't. I think a big thing with this site plan that I did was I was trying to see if I could find an old copy from either the building department or the health department. I'm still waiting for the health department to see if they have an old floor plan for me because the inside and the outside is not being changed. But if you guys feel that it needs to be done.
Again, we have with all the applications that are coming forward, and we don't want to set a precedent where someone who may have a much more onerous or more detailed site plan requirement could come to us and say, well, you did this for them, so you should do the same for me.
John, I found the provision I was looking for.
Okay.
So when it discussed what can be waived, it's under 212-39A2. And it says a special use permit shall contain the same information as required for a site plan review. And the important word there is information. Shall contain the same information as required for site plan review unless waived by the planning board. So what's being waived is the information required for site plan, not who addresses it,
Right.
not who prepares it. It's just the information contained therein, which is that A through P that I talked about before, and is also listed, I think, in the building application. They tell you all these things need to be included on a site plan. So my advice to you is that you cannot waive that it must be prepared by a licensed professional, but you can waive many of the other elements. And one way to deal with that, rather than asking for every specific waiver for A through P, is if you're satisfied with what this is, or you want a little bit more detail here or there, you can say that you're willing to waive all of those other than those that are shown on the drawing.
Okay. So what we need then is a list of those items. This is similar to what we did with the application recently over the restaurant that's across from
The other one on Du Bois.
yeah,
Yeah, the catering spot.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So with that, what we requested, and I guess this is what we need to request from you, because for some reason or other, this gentleman happened to also be a design professional, is that you probably need to find a design professional who can prepare the information according to what is there, or and I'm not really being clear. We need to have a drawing, but we can waive different aspects of that special use permit, but we can't waive the fact that it's drawn by a design professional, and it has initially those items that we can then go through and filter out.
Okay.
Does that make sense to you?
No, yeah, it does. If by chance we're able to get our hands on the last floor plan, would that work? Since
I
that is,
really don't know.
Okay.
It would kind of depend upon where that last floor plan came from. If it was from the building department records, or if it was from the library, which has a lot of that information
oh, that's good to know.
on the various buildings in the historical records department. In fact, they may be your best bet.
You have to be careful though, in that if something is drafted by a licensed engineer or a surveyor, there is a state law that says that it's illegal to modify those except by another professional who has to put forth what they have changed and what they have not changed.
Okay.
So although you're allowed to use
Okay.
another one's, if it's part of the public record,
Okay.
you can't modify it.
Got it. It has to be an
Unless-
exact replica.
Yeah,
Exact.
because what they're after is they don't want somebody misappropriating somebody else's work. is what-
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, he's saying another professional
Yes.
would have to modify it. We can't. Okay.
Right, and then designate exactly what they've modified. So
Okay.
that it's clear.
Okay. And with the floor plan itself, I know we were talking about the actual items that can be modified. Where should we look for the list of those items?
I have the list that came with the
Okay.
application that Corey said.
You can
Okay.
also
Yeah.
look at,
If you go to the website for the village, and you type in that code number, it will reference you to the specific part of the code.
Perfect. Thank you.
They fixed that up, so it works very well.
Awesome.
yeah, if you look on the code, and you can get the code online just by typing in Village of New Paltz, New York, E-code, E is in electronic, E-code, it will take you right to the code.
Perfect.
But
Thank you.
the provision is 212-23 A. And then under 1, it gives you 1 through P.
Okay.
And that tells you all the information that should be on a site plan.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
So if you can get that and come back to us, or if you can get that and submit it, we can guide you along the process to get you going, because we understand small business person. We totally understand that, and we want to figure out how we can get to yes on this.
Of course.
And we don't want to, there're just certain things that we need to be careful about.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So why don't you start with that?
Okay.
Take a look at that. You can reach out to Autumn, and with information, she copies me on it, and then we can weigh in on your progress and what we need to see following that.
Okay.
And then it can help you to prepare a bit more thorough presentation for the meeting on the 19th.
Okay.
19th. Okay. Oh, Autumn, what is your email?
I have her email.
Oh, you have her email?
Mhm.
Perfect. Okay. Okay.
All right, are we clear on that then? Rick,
Yes.
anything else we think you need to go over until we get that information back?
No, I think that's it. You did the initial seeker determination.
Yeah.
And just for the applicant's sake, what that means is that this is a type of request for an approval that the state has said, we don't need any environmental review with respect to this matter. So the environmental review process is now completed with respect to your application.
Okay.
Awesome. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you.
That's a big step.
Awesome. Woo.
Okay.
For some projects,
So-
it's a big step, very
Yeah.
big step.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Especially up in New Paltz.
Yeah.
So go ahead and get started on that. Keep us apprised of your progress so that we can determine how it's going and we can kind of guide you along the next steps. And Corey's usually pretty handy about helping as well. So
Absolutely. He's been awesome.
like I said, we want to help you get to yes.
Awesome.
Thank you so much. We really appreciate it.
You're very welcome. Good luck.
Good luck.
Right.
Good night.
So that leaves us then to the public comment. Autumn, is there any other public comments that were going on? Anything sent to you?
No, I haven't received anything else tonight.
Okay. All right, so I guess we need to close the public comment here. And so the next thing we need is a motion to adjourn the meeting.
So motioned.
Second,
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. It was a grinder tonight. Thank you for hanging with it. A lot of detailed information there. The 19th, our next meeting is going to be just as detailed and in person.
Something.
What's that?
I wanted to show you something. Look at
Okay. Oh, puppies.
Oh, puppies.
puppies.
Congratulations.
Oh.
Thank
How many
you.
little puppies do you have?
3.
Three
Oh,
little
that's great.
puppies.
Mhm.
Like, all healthy?
They're all nice and fat. They're so cute. I can't really see how the camera works it. They're little.
Little fat
cute.
puppies.
Their little faces.
Aw. Well, congratulations.
Thank you.
All right, everybody.
Moving forward with in-person meetings, is there going to be an online option? Like if we happen to be out of town
Yeah.
or something, do you know?
Yeah, if you're traveling, yes, there's an online
Okay.
option.
Okay, great.
I know your business travels.
Yeah,
Yeah.
legally, you're able to do it. That's not a problem. It just has to be set up though. So that you'd have to work with Autumn to sign in through a mechanism whereby people in the meeting can hear and see you. So if you can be, for instance, put it on a laptop, if the facility doesn't have, say, a big screen, you could be, a laptop could be there and you could sign in through a Zoom meeting or something through that laptop, and that would satisfy it as long as
Right.
the public could hear and see you and you can hear and see what's going on.
Okay.
Yeah,
We
I
can-
could.
We can talk more about that.
What's that?
I said I'm happy to walk through the tech with you at a later time.
Yeah, Autumn can bring a laptop. We can have you sign in, and you'll have a nice little virtual appearance there.
Great. Rick,
All right.
is next week or next meeting your last meeting?
Yeah, next meeting will be my last meeting. So
All right.
it's been with the planning board since 2016 and I've enjoyed every minute of it.
Yeah.
And, I'm happy with where I'm going, but also be sad for leaving a lot of my clients, but especially Village of New Paltz.
Yeah.
So will we have Ashley as part of the coterie of attorneys next week?
No, I'll be there for the next meeting. I'll be there. And then the meeting starting in May, Ashley will be the present.
Very good. All right, folks.
All right. Good night.
Good night, all.
Night.
Thanks.
Thank you.